Welcome to Clause 8, the #1 podcast on intellectual property, trusted by top in-house counsel, judges, and policymakers worldwide. Hosted by Eli Mazur, we bring you in-depth conversations with the personality shaping IP. Brought to you by TradeSpace, where ideas take flight.
Another feature of the pools obviously is that it's a cross-licensing mechanism, right? Sometimes there's innovators and implementers, but is that less the case these days? Where of course, some of these implementers get a few patents here and there, but is that really not the role of the pools these days? Is it more yeah?
I don't think, actually, I don't think it ends up being the primary purpose of a pool, because the cross-licensing thing matters more to some of the really big companies, but they tend to have large portfolios that cover just a wide range of stuff that's beyond the scope of a, single patent pool. And so, if you pick some of the biggest companies, they'll end up doing some cross-licensing deals just because they both have so many patents and they want to, clear it out. It is, in fact, a practical aspect of, a successful patent pool that it will also, turn into a cross-license among all of the licensors and licensees, participating. But I don't think that's what drives the success of a program, again, because the largest licensors have just portfolios that will far exceed the particular portfolio in a pool.
So everything you described sounds great. You get the innovators together, you get you pool their patents, you set a rate that they're equally unhappy as the implementers. Why is there such controversies about patent pools and what you do here? What do you think is driving that, I guess?
I think people like patent pools. I mean, that's what I hear. I mean, I think they like them, though, and I'll just, say, for us, at least, we try really hard to find a balance between licensors and licensees. Our logo is a bridge, and we use that a lot in our advertising materials. But that's how we see ourselves, as sort of connecting licensors and licensees. When there is, some negativity around pools, I think it tends to be that there's been a mismatch in the balance. It's that one side is more unhappy than the other side, and when that happens, I think you do see some negativity around pools. I don't think we've seen, at least for us, I think we haven't seen. I think we've been mostly successful at finding that balance. So I'll just say that.
Good. So I don't remember the first time I heard about pools, but I feel like every time I first heard about it, it was like this slide with these like circles representing different pools and companies all over, and it looked extremely complicated. And it's like every time you see a slide, it looks a little different, and somebody tells you, well, they moved from here and there. And and then I talk to some of these implementers, and they say, well, that's actually our experience. We have no idea what's going on. We we can't keep track of it, and that's what makes it so hard for us. Do you get the perspective? And especially really sophisticated companies, which I'm like, come on. And I guess any words of reassurances for them about kind of navigating all that? And
Well, I have a couple things to say about that. One is that many of the large implementers will also have patents that are relevant to the, underlying technology. And so we do encourage those implementers to become licensors in the programs, where they are licensees. They don't always do it, and for reasons that I don't fully understand, but to me, that's one of the best ways to really have knowledge and influence about, what's going on with a particular patent pool, is to be in the room where the licensors meet and talk about the program. So I think if that's, for the implementers who feel like they don't know what's happening, there's a really easy solution, which is show up and participate, and you will. So that's the thing. Um, Having said that, I would say, as you might imagine, getting, 10 or 20 or 30 significant companies in a room together and trying to negotiate something that is okay for everybody gets complicated. There's no doubt about that. That happens, and but I think that's a different thing. The underlying pool terms can can get uh, you know can get it can get tricky because there are just so many different interests to satisfy. But that's the cost of doing business, so to speak.
Yeah, to me, that a more specific issue that I kind of hear about and placing the pools in the ecosystem of, you know, a lot of patents covering a certain technology is that, an implementer says, okay, I want to be covered. I want to pay this pool and just, they pay this rate that's going to cover this technology. And they do that. And then another pool pops up. And then an independent company pops up. And then independent inventor approaches them. And they're like, well, when I agree to this one rate, I don't know, like what's, if I'm not fully covered and I don't know if even what I'm agreeing to pay is going to make economic sense by the time I'm done paying all of them. Any kind of thoughts about that? Yeah.
A few things about it. One is that for the um, for the rate itself, at least my experience is that the patent pool rates tends to be a pretty good deal because the and by what I mean by that is that if you went out and took, you know, 50 licenses for a particular technology and added them all up, versus went and took a patent pool license for those, same 50 companies, I think you generally find that the pool license is a good deal. And so I think that is that's just a dynamic that happens because for a bunch of reasons. For the for our patent pools, obviously we try to get um all of the licensors to join, who may have relevant patents, but it's never, it's, I can't say never because I think for some of our programs, we have been successful at getting, all of the relevant patents into our program, or at least all of them that are ever going to be enforced. And so, you can have that, successful outcome, but it's also fair to say that for um, a lot or maybe most programs, you don't get 100% aggregation. And so there's always going to, there are often, single patent owners or whatever who choose not to join the pool. And, and it's fair to say, yeah, you still have to deal with them. But the answer from my perspective is that, okay, look, you can take a pool license that covers, say 49 or they say 45 out of the 50 relevant licensors, or just go take 50 licenses. So, it can happen that you still have to deal with a handful of licensors who won't participate in a pool for whatever reason, but it does a lot of good. And then on the topic of multiple pools, that happens. It's sort of a similar answer, which is that obviously having one pool is the best outcome, but there's a whole spectrum, which is if you start with 50 licensors, it's better to have 5 pools than no pools. It's better to have 4 than 5. It's better to have 3 than 2 and 2 than 3. But, 1 is the one that we would, like to see, but it just as a market reality doesn't always work out that way. And it's not, one of the things just to say this is it's not like a new phenomena. If you rewind time and look at the technologies from decades ago, meaning, DVD and Blu-ray discs, which, were from the 90s or whatever it was, there were, a couple pools for those technologies. And it was for the reason that just worked out that the licensors didn't coalesce around a single program and ended up with two pools. And, implementers needed to take a license to both of the pools, but it's still a better outcome than not having any.